United Nations Secretary General urges warring parties to exercise maximum restraint. The U.S. State Department confirms that it has different options to pressure Houthi militia into peace. The war in Yemen deprives millions from access to healthcare services across the country. Welcome to Yemen Today TV. This is the English news with me, Roshan Fouad. The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres called on warring parties in Yemen to exercise maximum restraint and prevent any further escalation.
The Secretary General reiterates his call on the parties to exercise maximum restraint and prevent any escalation amid heightened tensions in the region, and as well as to respect their obligations under international humanitarian law.
The International Committee of the Red Cross Regional Director for Middle East, Fabrizio Carboni, stressed that civilians' lives must be protected in the armed conflict. In a press release, the Red Cross Committee called on all parties to the conflict to spare civilian life. Fabrizio Carboni added that only negotiations in good faith, based on guarantees for the people of Yemen, will increase prospects for a better future. For his part, David Miliband, CEO of the International Rescue Committee, said that the alarming escalation in attacks against civilians speaks volumes of the extent that the system designed to protect civilians in conflicts worldwide is failing them, stressing that when scrutiny is removed, impunity prevails.
Bloomberg exchanged views on possible options to achieve immediate de-escalation and pave a way for comprehensive political talks.
The Special Envoy for Yemen, Hans Grunberg, concluded a visit to Riyadh. He met with the Saudi officials and Yemeni politicians. Grunberg also had in-depth discussions with the P5. During his meetings, Grunberg denounced the recent wave of military escalation that has engulfed Yemen and spilled over the borders to the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. The UN envoy expressed grave concern about the impact of this escalation on the prospects of peace in Yemen and the heavy toll it has taken on civilian lives and livelihoods. For his part, the United States envoy for Yemen, Tim Lenderking, expressed his country's condemnation of the escalation carried out by the Houthi militia in Yemen and the cross-border attacks, stressing that attacks against civilians and civilian infrastructure is unacceptable. The U.S. envoy affirmed his country's position to support all efforts aimed at ending the war and establishing comprehensive peace in Yemen. He reiterated his country's support for Yemen's unity, stability, and security. To that end, the State Department said that it is seeking options to hold Houthi militia accountable for their attacks. The U.S. State Department's regional spokeswoman, Geraldine Griffiths, said that her country has many options and tools available economically, politically, and diplomatically to pressure the Houthi rebels. She stressed that there are no military solutions and that her country is committed to searching for appropriate solutions to stop the war and achieve comprehensive and lasting peace in Yemen. The United Nations Security Council condemned in the strongest terms the heinous terrorist attacks in Abu Dhabi. The members of the Security Council reaffirmed that terrorism constitutes one of the most serious threats to international peace and security. They underlined the need to hold perpetrators, organizers, financiers, and sponsors of these acts of terrorism accountable and bring them to justice. The members reiterated that any acts of terrorism are criminal and unjustifiable.
Today, the Council has spoken with one voice that this egregious aggression by the Houthis, as well as the proliferation of missile and other technology that enabled the terrorist attack, is a clear threat to the entire international community. The Council has made it clear in its statement today that more international action is needed to address the Houthi threat and hold them responsible.
Any political consultations will not succeed under healthy militia breaches of previous international agreements made to re-escalations in economic war against Yemenis. Indicators do not reveal that the militia will resort to wisdom and submit to peace. Even as diplomatic efforts continue, the international community must get tougher with this extremist Houthi militia. The Fouad report has more details.
Yemen is not Afghanistan. The New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman wrote this on his visit to Sana'a more than a decade ago, long before the start of the war that has torn the country apart since Houthi rebel groups seized control. Today, Sana'a is in the hands of Houthi rebels, a group ideologically unrelated to Al-Qaeda but with a similarly extreme worldview. The city is now a hollow shell of its former self, paralyzed by the war which is now in its 8th year and suffocated by Houthi oppression. The coalition has repeatedly offered the rebels opportunities to negotiate, but all have been rejected. This week, after suffering major defeats on the battlefields in central Yemen, Houthi rebels doubled down, launching deadly drone attacks on Saudi and Emirati territory. In May of last year, Martin Griffiths, who was then the UN's envoy to Yemen, said a peace deal appeared to be nowhere in sight. The sense of helplessness has gradually driven the UN to adopt an appeasement strategy in which it is sought to legitimize Houthis as future player in Yemeni politics in exchange for a chance at peace. It hasn't worked too. The group has also abducted dozens of local employees of the US Embassy in spite of Washington following the UN's lead by removing the Houthi rebels from its former list of a terrorist organization last year. On Wednesday, 2 days after a Houthi attack on Abu Dhabi, the US President Joe Biden said he would consider reversing that decision. It seems there is a willful self-deception on the part of both Houthi rebels and the international actors appeasing them that allows this dire situation to continue and gives false hope that a peace deal lies at the end of the road currently being followed. In the end, for a durable compromise to be achieved, the international community must demonstrate solidarity with the thousands of fighters and millions of civilians who are making sacrifices to stop Houthi advances in their tracks.
The United Nations said that shelter needs are rising in Ma'rib and Shabwa following recent escalations. In its latest report, the UN Refugee Commissioner said that new displacements continue to take place and it is registering an increased need for shelter support. The organization also revealed a significant increase in vulnerabilities compared to the year 2020. For its part, the UN Migration Agency recorded the displacement of more than 157,500 individuals in 12 governments during 2021. International Organization of Migration indicated the conflict remained the main driver of displacement, noting that the situation was aggravated by a weakened economy, the COVID-19 pandemic, rains and flooding, and fuel shortages. It indicated that Ma'rib witnessed the highest rates of displacement due to escalating hostilities and shifting front lines. The conflict in Yemen has led to significant damage to the health, economy, physical, as well as social fabric. It has also caused hundreds of thousands of deaths. While many of these are the result of war's direct violence, others are due to the war's indirect effects, including limited access to healthcare services and hard living conditions. Abdul Jalil is one of those affected by the war. His sons suffer a major medical problem, yet he can't help them. The Fouad report has more on Abdul Jalil's story.
More than 50 years ago, the village of Uqba held him in the high mountains of Sabr, where he had a simple life, but he left it, heading to the city, under the challenge of epilepsy that afflicted his 4 sons. A 50-year-old Abdul Jalil Muhammad is the father of 4 sons, Yaqub, Hamza, Meher and Abdullah, who grew up with rickety bodies, trembling limbs, and stray glances as if they were crying out for help and blame on the bed of illness between death and life. Abdullah left the world to rest from the torment of illness, leaving the wrinkles of years that appeared on his father's sad face, whose moments passed by like long years while he watched his children filled with pain and torture.
في القرية كان شديد علينا صعب.
It was really difficult for us staying in the village, as in order to reach any kind of transportation, we almost take 2 hours. I have got 3 sons. The 4th one died. We fled to the city in order to be close to transportation, as I take them to the doctor on a monthly basis. We were shocked by high cost of living in the city, medications, rent, transportations, and also expensive food. The medicine, which used to cost 75,000 riyal, now it costs 275,000 riyals.
The father hides most hours of the day from the eyes of his children who are suffering from epilepsy, searching for treatment. He wanders pharmacies and is unable to buy medicaments that are insanely expensive. He changed the direction towards government hospitals, hoping to find a glimmer of hope in a cure, but they no longer give patients free treatment as they used to, until he realized that the treatment is for those who have money only.
أخرج من البيت حق الصباح.
I leave the house early in the morning to look for medicines and food. Sometimes I find kind people who support us, and sometimes I don't. And then I go back home with nothing, which angers my son more and more. I've nothing except to pray to God, either to save us or surrender to death, as I failed to help them. I leave the house and get back just as I left it, with nothing in hand.
The father, Abdul Jalil Muhammad, returns to his home empty-handed, without medicine or food, and has no way but to return. This is how the story ended with us, but it continues with this grieving family to live the finer details that bleed the hearts.
Turning to Ma'rib, the government forces backed by tribes regain new areas from Houthi rebels. According to military sources, the government forces defeated the rebels and captures new areas during a violent attack that caused heavy losses among the rebels. For its part, the coalition announced that it carried out 28 airstrikes targeting the rebels in the province, adding that the operations resulted in the destruction of 13 military vehicles and killing of more than 90 militants. The director of Site Intelligence Group said that Al-Qaeda is the Arabian Peninsula, announced the death of a military commander in a U.S. airstrike in Yemen. The director of Site said the group did not mention any date or location for the death of Salim bin Salim, also known as Abu Umair al-Hadrami, who was also a former associate of Al-Qaeda's leader Osama bin Laden. She pointed to Twitter reports of a U.S. airstrike that killed 3 ACAP militants on November 14. Coming next. In Lash, the fragrant fountain or Kadi is the story of love and life intertwined together.
راتب الواحد 120 ألف، والكيس الدقيق ب18,000، والكيس السكر اليوم ب20,000. كم يعني بيعطي هذا الراتب كامل كيس سكر وكيس دقيق؟
المواطن اليمني يعيش في أزمة إنسانية وغذائية مؤلمة من غلاء الأسعار وفحشة الأسعار وغلاء الصرف والعملة الأجنبية في البلد.
حالتي الحين حالة لما ندب احنا شلقيرة ما نقدرش ناكل الأكل داخل، ما احنا بحاجة صعبة.
Welcome back. A UN report confirmed that about 81% of Yemenis have fallen into poverty due to the war, ignited by Houthi militia in 2014. According to a recent report by the International Organization for Migration, nearly 2/3 of the population of Yemen needs humanitarian assistance. The ongoing conflict has exacerbated the existing vulnerabilities by threatening civilian lives, damaging key infrastructure, and plunging an estimated 81% of Yemenis below the poverty line. War and conflict aggravate existing poverty in Yemen. According to the World Bank, fragile states account for 1/4 of global poverty. Poverty in Yemen is no exception to this trend, yet the world may consider Yemen the example of conflict deepening poverty if fighting continues. This report has more details.
Yemen has become increasingly war-torn since 2014, and as a result, poverty in Yemen has significantly increased. The World Bank reports that more than 40% of households lost their main source of income, placing people under the poverty line, and the country is struggling to lift its people out of impoverished conditions. Poverty in Yemen holds one of the highest rates in the Arab world. Half of the population lives on less than $2 per day. Yemen's population stands at 25.4 million, and approximately 54% of those people live in poverty. A lack of jobs, even among graduates, has forced young adults to the streets, leading to even more widespread poverty in Yemen. A report done by the UNDP found that the instability in Yemen has had disastrous effects on Yemenis. It reports that 11.7 million individuals have become impoverished as a result of the war. In addition, 4.9 million are malnourished. Of this number, 600,000 are children under the age of 5. The report also found that the war reduced economic growth in Yemen by $88.8 billion. In addition, the Yemeni rial lost almost 75% of its value in the past years. This resulted in Yemen's status as the world's second least country in terms of income. Most of the population in Yemen doesn't have access to clean water and proper sanitation. 10 million people, nearly half of the population, go without enough food to eat. Child malnutrition rates are the highest in the world. Half of the children under the age of 5 are stunted. The UN estimates that approximately 80% of Yemenis are vulnerable to hunger. About 14.3 million are in need of medical assistance to combat malnutrition, along with other issues like starvation, cholera, and measles. Poverty in Yemen is frightening. Yemen demonstrates extremely poor standards of life expectancy, education, and overall living. This poverty crisis is related to the violence and chronic hunger in Yemen caused by the conflict. Yemen will continue to stay on track to become the world's most impoverished country by 2022 if the conflict does not end.
The International Crisis Group said that Yemen needs an economic ceasefire as much as a military one. In its latest analysis report, the think tank said that economic conflict is not the only factor driving Yemen's war or preventing its resolution. It urged to the UN envoy to launch a mediation track to identify the economic conflict's key players and begin to lay the groundwork for an economic truce even while shooting continues. The Yemeni Customs Authority announced that the total revenues of the last year accounted to about 571 billion and 243 million riyals, an increase over the year 2020, which amounted to 99.65%. This came in a statement by the head of the Customs Authority, Abdel Hakim Al-Kubati. The head of the authority expected that government reforms in the field of customs would contribute to achieving significant revenue during the current year. Yemen enjoys a geographical diversity which allows for growing plenty types of plants. Of those plants is the fragrant pandan, or what is known locally as kadi. It is a tropical plant prized for its fragrant and pointy leaves. The leaves have long been used in non-Western medicine and are sold whole or as extract or powder. In Yemen, however, the fragrant pandan is a symbol of love for nature and life. More details on this story are within the following report.
Fragrant pandan or kadi is an aromatic plant that is widely used as source of joy with its presence in weddings and occasions. It inspired and enchanted lovers, tempted poets, so they sang and enriched their poems with it, gifted to those they love, and related it to those they adore. The story of pandan began decades ago, when Prince Ahmed Fadl al-Abdali gifted this aromatic plant to Yemenis after bringing it from India.
Al-Kadi originated from India when Prince Al-Qandana brought it from there, and it expanded to Al-Husayni, several other regions and highlands. It's abundant in summer and it is less present in winter.
cultivation of this plant is linked to stories of love and land, which is what prompted many farmers here in Lahj to turn their agricultural lands into green meadows for planting pandan trees. Among the circulating stories about pandan is that the flowers is formed during the day and blooms at night with the rays of moonlight. In the early morning hours it is picked by farmers and then they go to sell it in a market for Qadi and jasmine flowers in the city of Al-Huta.
Al-Qadi begins to grow within 2 or 3 months. And the more you give it attention, the more it gives you a bigger crop. For instance, in summer days, grains appear and we do not know if there is an astronomical process. We don't know if there is a relation between moon and the plant.
Fragrant pandan is one of the aromatic trees and its cultivation is widely spread in the governorate of Lahj, specifically in the farms of Tuban district. Lahj pandan is distinguished by its sweet aromatic scent and is presented as gifts on occasions, as women use it to decorate during weddings and holidays.
Lahj pandan is better in quality than the one from Hudaydah. People use it in weddings and occasions, and its fragrance is better than perfumes. It can also be used as a perfume for clothes.
Production of this fragrance plant increases in the summer and is sold in low prices, but in the winter its price reaches to 5,000 riyals per. Most families here in Lahj depend heavily on its cultivation as a source of income.
Here is a reminder of the main headlines. The United Nations Secretary General urges warring parties to exercise maximum restraint. The U.S. State Department confirms that it has different options to pressure Houthi militia into peace. The war in Yemen deprives millions from access to healthcare services across the country. This is the end of the news. For more, follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Yemen Today English. This is Roshan Fouad. Thank you for watching.